I would like to call to order this meeting of the Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency for January 26, 2023. Can we have the roll call taken, please?
Yes, Director Engfer.
Here.
Director Koenig.
Here.
Director McPherson.
He's here but muted.
Yes, I see that. Director McPherson, are you able to unmute yourself?
Why don't you come back around?
No, I'm on now.
Okay.
It didn't happen.
Okay, great. Thank you. Director Cassidy.
Here.
Director Koopman.
Here.
We have a noticed absence from Director Pollock, unable to attend for a medical reason. Director Dillis.
Here.
Director Stiles.
Here.
Director Perry.
Here.
Director Foltz.
Here.
And Chair Mehud.
I'm here. Do we have to note that Director Pollock's absence is excused?
Yes, we can note that. I know that there was.
I know it's for a medical reason, so I just want to make sure that for the record, it's shown as an excused absence.
Great, thank you. We will note that. And I did want to note which alternate directors, although they are not here in a voting capacity, which ones are joining us. And so I'm taking a look at our participants right now, and I'm not seeing Director Baskin. Sorry, we have a lot of folks joining us this evening, so I'm just making sure I'm not missing anybody. I'm not seeing Director Brown. I do see Director Hutchinson. I do not see Director Hayes. You see newly appointed Director Timms from City of Scotts Valley. I see Director Hecklow. I am looking to see if Director Smalley is joining us. And I don't see him on there at the.
No, I don't think he's joining us tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
We had one item related to the very first item, and that is that the auditor that is going to be joining us has a hard stop at 6:30 this evening. So there was a request that if there are individual director reports, which is item 1.4, if we could move those to later in the meeting.
All right. Then this is the time for oral communications from the public on items within the purview of the agency, but that are not on the agenda tonight. Are there any members of the public that would like to address the board right now? If so, please raise your hand. And if somebody could check in the room itself, are there any members of the public in the room itself?
There is one member of the public in the room, but his hand is not up at the moment, not looking to speak. So
all right, and I don't see any hands up among the others. So with that, are there any individual directors' reports? Seeing none, we'll go ahead, and I just want to acknowledge the addition of two and the appointment of two new members to the board. Bob Foltz is joining us from the San Lorenzo Valley Water District, and Alan Timms from the City of Scotts Valley as an alternative director to the agency. Next, we have the consent agenda. Would anybody like to pull either of the items that are there, the approval of the minutes or the annual reimbursement disclosure for discussion? Seeing none, can we take a vote? Well, are there any members of the public that would like to discuss any of the items that are on the consent agenda?
Not in the room.
Okay, I don't see any hands up. All right, can we take a vote on the consent agenda, please?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll
Koenig.
second. Cassidy.
We have a motion from Director Koenig and a second from Director Cassidy.
Thank you.
Roll call. Director Engfer,
Aye.
Director Koenig,
Aye.
Director McPherson,
Aye.
Director Cassidy,
Aye.
Director Koopman,
Aye.
Director Pollock's not joining us, Director Dillis,
Aye.
Director Stiles,
Aye.
Director Perry,
Aye.
Director Foltz,
Abstain.
and Chair Mayhood.
Aye.
Great, the motion
The
passes.
consent agenda is approved. Next, we move to item 4.1, which is the annual financial report for fiscal year 2022. And is this going to be presented by Nick or?
This is, Nicholas is going to introduce the item and then he will introduce the auditor.
Okay,
Let me promote him to panelist. Okay, Nick Kearns should be promoted to a panelist momentarily. Chair Mayhood, I also see, I'm not sure when it came up, but I see a hand raised by Rosemary Menard.
yes, Rosemary, is it on this item or something else?
Sorry, there we go. I don't know what anyone else is seeing, but I am only seeing the welcome screen. So I am not seeing the rotating. There we go. Thank you. So
Great, thank you. Okay. I'm looking for Nick Kearns.
I see him.
Okay, great.
All right.
Okay.
We,
And so this is Nick Kearns, our treasurer. And why don't you just leave him here? Because I think he's got a couple of items. So let's just leave him on this side so we don't have to keep putting him back and forth, okay? Go
Great.
ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Board. Happy to kick this off and then hand it over to the auditor. The agency engaged Nigro PC in the spring in June of 2022, and we've been fortunate to work with the audit partner at the firm, Paul Kmark. So once the fiscal year closed, kind of gathered everything that they requested, receipts and reports and requested documents to give them what they needed to do to perform the audit, and they assisted with compiling the report that's in your packet. I believe Paul's joined us tonight. There he is. Hi, Paul.
Good evening, everybody.
With that, I'll hand it over to you. Thanks for, thank you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Kmark from the firm Nigro. We're out of Walnut Creek and Murrieta in Southern California. Wanted to give you a overview of the financial statements for Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022, and to look at the fiscal responsibility over those financial statements. So if I may share my screen, I'll pop this in. Hopefully everybody can see that. Everybody ready? I'm gonna hit the share button. There we go. Everybody can see my screen. Good. Just give me a yes or no.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to get right into the meat and potatoes here. I'm going to start with on page be on page 8 at the bottom of the report. We're going to start with the profit and loss, or the statement of revenues, expenses, changes in that position. This year, we asked the member agencies for contributions, $140,000. Operating grants still coming in for the operation of the groundwater agency, $417,277 requested, received this year. Groundwater management expenditures, $363,621, and general administrative overall administration of the organization, $111,81. Total expenses, $474,702, giving us a change in that position, $82,575 added to next year's reserves to move forward. Total of $256,538. We come back, we'll see where those hold at year end. We've got cash and cash equivalents, $57,251. Some of the grant receivables still continuing to be received. Cash coming in, promised to pay from the grantor. Had some bills to pay at the end of the year, and unrestricted net position there, $256,538. Fiscal responsibility looks good. We had a chance to review the financial information provided to us by Nick, being the steward of the books this year. And we're able to render you a clean, unmodified opinion for the fiscal period. Any questions?
Do we have any questions from members of the board? Let's see, I don't see any. Whoops, there we go. Okay. Go ahead, Jack.
Yes, well, I have to ask a question. Just recognizing you don't have anything negative to say, which is great. As you say, we have a clean opinion, but do you have any suggestions or things you think might help us in any way, be more streamlined, or anything you'd like to see us do, even if it didn't raise to that level of having to note it in the audit?
We've had some discussions orally with Nick in regarding the accounting's move over into his possession now, and reviewing the information as it comes in. We believe that how everything is transpiring with the takeover by Scotts Valley Water District for the financial information has been a good move, and he's been a good financial steward of the information there, and should be able to present to you, with updates throughout the year, how things are going and how the numbers come to rest at the end of the fiscal period, and what are the percentage ownerships within there of the each of the member agencies that are in there, any new members coming in. So
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? As I understand it, we need a motion from the board to accept this. Would somebody like to advance that?
I would move we accept the financial audit and report.
Do you want to allow for public comment on this item before a vote?
Yes, now that we've got a motion, let's go ahead and go out to the public and see if any of them have comments about it.
There's not any comments within the room here.
Okay, and among the attendees, I don't see any hands up. So I don't think we have any. So are there any further questions or comments among the board members? If not, can we have a roll call vote, please?
We have a motion by Director Perry and a second by Director Dillis. So I'll move to the roll call. Director Engfer.
Aye.
Director Koenig.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
Director Foltz.
Yes.
And Chair Mayhood.
Aye. Okay, the motion passes.
thank you all. We'll talk to you next year. Go Niners. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have item 4.2, the dry season stream flow monitoring request for proposals. Tim, who is going to take this one?
Rob Swartz is going to take this one, so I'm going to promote him here up to a panelist, and you can take it from there. Yep, you're good. Am I on? You are. Here we go.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. Before you, in describing your packet, we have a request for proposals that we are intending to release to secure consulting services.
Is that muted? Is that
Um,
muted? No.
no, that's just his.
Okay.
So
That's fine.
folks on.
Thanks. So as described in your packet, the groundwater sustainability plan identifies 5 locations that we do dry season monitoring at to understand what the base flow is in these creeks, to understand the relationship between the groundwater basin and previously a consultant performed that task in last year, Balance Hydrologic. And when that task order was brought to the board for approval, the board requested that we go out and go through a procurement process. And so we've developed a request for proposals that has a base monitoring period of 3 years with options for up to 2 additional years. So we have brought this draft for you to seek your input so that we can release that out to secure services and ultimately bring a recommendation back to you in March, because the dry season typically starts in April. So we would want to have those services in place so that the equipment can be put onto the sites and the monitoring can begin.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from directors? Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Thanks, Gail. Rob, noting that MGA recently contracted with Trout Unlimited, I guess, multi-part question. Do you anticipate that they may bid on this? And if so, are there any possible efficiencies the 2 agencies may gain by their participation?
I don't know if they intend to bid on this. That's a little too speculative. I don't know that there are any efficiencies to gain either. The nature of the work is quite distinct from what's occurring in the MGA.
Was there a second part to that question, Doug?
No, he answered both of my questions. Thanks.
Okay. I don't have a question about the RFP, but I just had a question about the reasoning behind some of these sites. As I understand it, these are 5 monitoring sites that the county used to do the monitoring at and paying for. And now we're shifting this over to Santa Margarita, which I guess is okay. But what I don't understand is the 2 sites that are one is on Newell Creek, upstream of the San Lorenzo River. It strikes me that that's really not an area that's going to be affected by groundwater pumping that the large agencies, ourselves in Scotts Valley, are doing. And asking, I mean, really that's downstream of the county's, it's kind of the county's purview, just the same way as we're not asking, San Lorenzo Valley is not asking to put the monitoring of Fall Creek or Foreman Creek on to the back of Santa Margarita. So I'm a little puzzled why that one's on there, and similarly why we're making measurements in the San Lorenzo River upstream of that, when these are not areas that are going to be affected by, they're not really the issues that we're addressing with the other 3, which have to do with the linking of pumping, especially production pumping, with shallow groundwater and base flow into the creeks like Bean Creek and Ziante Creek.
So these are the sites that are outlined in the groundwater sustainability plan as the required monitoring for our monitoring network. They were identified through several years worth long process to note where the most likely areas where we both didn't understand the interactions were and where there was likely to be an interaction. Those were not only municipal pumping sites, but also sites with concentrations of non-de minimis pumpers, as well as some of the smaller water systems. This is I'm not sure how to answer your question about the county has never monitored groundwater influence for our own interest. We originally held the contract as a benefit and service to the Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency as the agency was developing. As part of our joint staffing measure, we took on the administrative burden of doing the surface water, groundwater monitoring at the time, but as it no longer seems appropriate for the county to, given that the agency now has the capacity to run its own contracts, the agency is taking over this contracting. So it's never been a question of county impacts. These are the sites that were chosen based on understanding the impact of groundwater pumping on surface water flows.
Any other questions or comments? Ruth?
Yeah, I think that Doug pointed towards something that would be good to consider, which is, and I'll put it as a request to staff, is when we have contracts, please check if there's any way of coordinating with MGA and getting some, maybe doing joint contracts when we're in the same stage of development.
Are there any, let's see, any other comments from directors? How about from members of the public?
Not within the room. Let me look on the attendees.
I don't see any hands up there. All right. We need a motion.
I'll move the recommended action. Koenig.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first by Director Koenig and a second by Director Stiles. So I'll move to the roll call vote. Director Engfer.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Director Engfer, I didn't understand. Could you repeat that?
Sorry, try again. Aye. Did I come through?
Yes. Director Koenig.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
Director Foltz.
Yes.
And Chair Mahood.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, this brings us to item, motion passed. Brings us to item 4.3 to change basically who our authorized representative and treasurer is with the Santa Cruz County Bank. And Nick, did you want to take this? Or?
I can take this.
No, you want to do this? Okay.
Sure, thank you. It's essentially a personnel change. So Stephanie Hill at San Lorenzo Valley Water District used to be in that position. The responsibility has shifted over to Scotts Valley. And so accordingly, it's something that Nick Kearns in his role would assume. So this is essentially doing the necessary paperwork and designation so he can serve that role with Santa Cruz County Bank.
Okay. And as I understand it, the rescinding resolution number 217-2 is just basically saying that Stephanie is no longer in that role at SLVWD. And
That's correct. Stephanie Hill is no longer with SLV Water District.
Okay, I think this is pretty straightforward. Is there any discussion? How about members of the public?
Not within the room.
Okay, I don't see any there.
I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first from Director McPherson and a second from Director Cassidy. So I'll move to the roll call. Director Engfer.
Aye.
Director Koenig.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Pollock. Oh, I'm sorry, he's not here. Director Dillis.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
Director Foltz.
Yes.
And Chair Mahood.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
This brings us to item 5.1, which is our election of officers for 2023. And I would like to open nominations. Well, so just to say we have president, vice president, secretary, and then we also need to appoint somebody as treasurer. And I think we've already sort of said that in terms of Nick Kearns as being our treasurer, so don't really need to do anything about that. So it's just the 3 positions, president, vice president, and the secretary. So I will invite nominations for president.
Director Cassidy would like to nominate Director Perry for president or chair.
See,
You beat me to it.
is there a second?
Oh, second.
Yeah, can we do other nominations or?
I'll second.
Can we do a slate?
I'll second Director Cassidy's nomination.
So we have a motion by Director Cassidy and a second by Director Koenig to appoint Director Perry. However, Director Koopman raised his hand as well. And so
I'd like to renominate Gail Mahood for president.
Okay.
Well, actually, the way this works, Jeff, thank you. But the way this works is if you have a motion and a second, it's on the table, and Robert's Rules of Order requires that we go ahead and vote on that nomination. And then if it were to fail, then you're free to make another nomination. So that's kind of the way motions work at places like this, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
So let's see if there's, so we have a motion and a second, and is there any discussion among the directors?
I have a comment. I know motions generally work that way. I know the city council, different entity, but we actually do listen multiple motions to appoint somebody to positions of leadership, and then we vote on the first one that was raised, and then we go to the second one. So just a question of what is our rule?
We have a very abbreviated set of procedural rules, and it's not addressed. So it's the Gail can make a decision on we want to roll this, because there is not a definitive role among our very abbreviated procedural rules.
I looked it up, and there isn't really anything there, and so I'm just basically going by Robert's Rules of Order on this. And so were you saying that you wanted it to be a vote between 2 people, or that you wanted to have all 3 positions at the same time? I wasn't quite clear what you were getting at, Jack.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I was getting at, since we've taken one position, so I was suggesting entertaining a second or third, or however many might come up for that position, which I've seen elsewhere. So I was asking if that is appropriate in this setting for the Santa Margarita Gallery.
And I think in this instance, because it's not in the rules that we've adopted procedurally, Gail, our rules say that Robert's Rules of Order apply unless it's in those abbreviated rules. So Gail, I didn't look it up, but I trust you, Gail. And I think that you get to call how you want to run that, the process on this nomination and voting.
I think that we should, in the absence of anything specific, we should use Robert's Rules of Order. But Jack, I think we can come back to this. That might be something that maybe the board wants to discuss, whether they want to change that in the future and have it done some other way. I think, which is perfectly fine.
Thanks.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Any other comments?
I'd like to have put out a comment. So I guess I'd like to make a comment about Chris Perry's nomination, in that I think that Chris Perry would obviously make a great director. He's been a director for years, and he's done a wonderful job, and all of us really enjoy him being the director. So I don't think that that's a problem. But I do think that San Lorenzo Valley doesn't get a lot of representation in the process currently. It hasn't had that many years on the board. And so I thought that it would be good to let Gail Mahood continue on for another year. She's only done it for 1 year, and allow Chris is a great director, but it would be good to allow San Lorenzo Valley to still have some interaction with how we're getting this information. A lot of stuff is happening behind the scenes right now. There's very little visibility, and I think San Lorenzo Valley has almost the least amount of visibility into what's coming down the pike, and having her be at least board president gives them some opportunity to get some information coming early on. So the comment, if we voted Chris down and then she failed to become successful in a vote, then I would easily vote for Chris. So.
Well, I really, you are warming the cockles of my heart, Jeff, in terms of coming to the defense of our little district. But I guess what I would like to see is that personally, I think it's fine for Chris to do it. And I would hope that what we would do is alternate back and forth every year would be good. And that way everybody's got a chance to be president, who wants to be, that are directors, and that, and sometimes people don't want to do it for a variety of reasons. But remember, there is the vice president position. And I think that usually the way we operate is both the president and the vice president meet with Tim or with Perrette to discuss the agenda. So it isn't, so I think there is some chance for balance there, certainly. So I'm not as worried about that as maybe I've been a vocal advocate for San Lorenzo Valley, and I appreciate your support in that. But I'm not, frankly, too worried that we're going to lose out if Chris is president. And I think actually he's been pretty good to us to make sure that our interests are represented.
Great, sounds good.
All right, let me just go ahead and see if there's any other comments. And any comments among attendees?
Not within the room.
Okay, then Tim, you want to take a roll call vote on that?
Sure. So I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the motion was by Director Koenig and the second was by Director Cassidy. Reversed. Okay, thank you. We will move to the roll call. Director Angford.
Aye.
Director Koenig.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
Director Foltz.
Yes.
And Chair Mahood.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So the way we work here is that I continue on to just finish up chairing the rest of this meeting. And then Chris will take over presiding at the beginning of the next meeting. So with that, I will entertain nominations for the position of vice president.
I would nominate Gail.
And I'll second.
Vice president.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Are there any comments from directors?
The only thing I would comment is what Gail said, Jeff, is that everything, all interactions with staff that the chair has, the vice chair also has. So it's kind of like a team.
I thought there was something about setting the agenda or something.
We do, no, we do it all together.
Yeah, the staff sets the agenda, but the president and the vice president have equal voice in either wanting changes or discussing it before the meetings.
Yeah, I apologize for my camera not working.
No, that's all right.
New PC here. Thanks.
I can see it. My camera's on.
Okay, are there any, any comments among members of the public?
Not within the room.
Okay, I don't see any hands up out there. So can we go ahead and have a roll call vote on the motion?
Sure, we have a motion by Director Perry and a second by Director Stiles. Director Angford.
Aye.
Director Koenig,
Aye.
Director McPherson,
Aye.
Director Cassidy,
Aye.
Director Koopman. Aye. Director Dillis.
Aye.
Director Stiles,
Aye.
Director Perry. Aye. Director Foltz,
Yes.
and Chairman Hood.
Yes,
Okay,
motion passes. And the third position is we have nominations for the position of secretary, which I think Jack Dillis has been slaving away at this job for the last year or two.
It's the easiest job I ever had.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Do we have any nominations from the floor for secretary?
I would nominate Director Cassidy.
Okay, are there any seconds?
I'll second.
Okay, any comments?
Do you want to do it?
Yeah,
How much work is it, Jack?
You just sign the DocuSign. That's it.
I can spare the time for that.
any comments by directors? Okay, any comments by members of the public?
not within the room.
Okay, I don't see any hands up here. All right, can we have a roll call vote on the position of secretary, please?
Yes, we have a motion by Director Perry and a second by Director Dillis. So on to roll call, Director Engfer,
Aye.
Director Koenig,
Aye.
Director McPherson,
Aye.
Director Cassidy,
Aye.
Director Koopman,
Aye.
Director Dillis,
Aye.
Director Stiles,
Aye.
Director Perry,
Aye.
Director Foltz,
Yes.
and Chairman Hood.
Yes. Okay. And I think we've already, by the previous motion that the board made, essentially appointed Nick Kurtz as our treasurer, so we don't need to do that again. So next we go on to item 5.2, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Implementation Grant Round 2 application.
Correct.
Who's
So
gonna run that?
I'm gonna introduce that. Since the last meeting of the board, the application was finalized and submitted. And so the two attachments that really outline the proposed work and the supporting material were included as part of the board packet, which was the scope of work, budget and schedule, and then some of the supporting material that supported the projects that were being proposed. So that was included to keep the board informed in terms of what that final submittal looked like. And so we weren't planning to go into detail on those attachments, but certainly can answer questions if there's any follow-up related to what was in the board packet.
Okay, Jack.
Yes, I have a question. It's on reference to page, the agenda packet 5.2-16. Where it's talking about install Vine Hill School monitoring well. And my recollection was that we weren't going to do that monitoring well, that we ran into some issues in terms of choosing that location. So I was trying to, was there further discussion or on that topic? Just wondering why it's in here, and I'd be thrilled if it were there for a lot of reasons.
Okay, it is in there. I'm gonna turn it over to Rob at this point, so he can respond here.
Yes, my understanding is the site is actually secured. It was not an issue of access. It was about budget. So there was a grant from the previous, was it Prop 68? That was believed at the time, and that's a number of years ago, that you could construct 8 monitoring wells. Since that time, costs have gone up very significantly. So the deep well was pulled from the scope of work that's being funded by Prop 68. And so we saw an opportunity with this current grant to pursue funding for that.
So then you're not aware of any objections on the part of the school district or others in that area?
Yeah, I agree with Jack, because I remember that too, that the last time it was discussed that there were some issues of access and worrying about, the kids being near this being done. So I understand that we had to pull it cost-wise, but then I thought there was this additional problem of access. So is it that can we still go back to that spot, or are we going to try to find another place, nearby that puts us into the Butano formation and allows us to monitor that aquifer?
And in the past, I made positive comments about this location just because I thought what a great educational opportunity for the students at the school, assuming that any safety issues could get dealt with, of course. But I love that site just for involving our youth in the whole water subject.
We know the answer on this one. The school district is very firm that they're in support of the project as long as our construction is during the summer months and not during the school year. They have granted us an easement. They've been very cooperative and helpful, but they would not allow contractors and heavy equipment around the school site when school is in session.
Okay, so I'm presuming we could work around that.
If we get the money, we're going to be good, I think.
Thank you.
Good. Well, that's good news, but it'll still be there so that we can do outreach activities with the kids once it's constructed then. Okay. Any other comments? Doug?
Yeah, I just simply wanted to comment and commend staff for fabulous work here. As reading through this, super impressed by the level of detail and comprehensive thinking and obvious collaboration among the various entities here. I thought it was a job well done, and I hope the state thinks so too.
Yeah.
Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, when I was reading over the document, something that jumped out at me was the statement that the management actions would help with the lower aquifers, and this would help end up helping the private well owners and small system operators. But the private well owners are not in the lower aquifers; they're only in the Santa Margarita and the Monterey, neither of which are intended to be helped by any of these actions. So it's misrepresenting that particular aspect of it. I don't think that's a showstopper, but I just wanted to mention that that's an incorrect statement in the document. Because we were taught by Georgina very carefully that there's really not little that can be done to raise the water levels for the private well owners. They're not in those lower aquifers.
I guess I get your point. We don't want to oversell this, but it is true from the modeling that was done that raising the groundwater level in the Lompico actually raises the groundwater levels in the overlying Monterey formation. So there is at least a marginal improvement. The other thing also is at the very northern end of the basin where the rock formations kind of come up from the syncline and are exposed at the surface, the Butano is actually exposed at the surface there, and there are private wells in the Butano. So you're absolutely right, Jeff, that most of the private wells will be only marginally helped, but it's kind of a little bit like a rising tide raises all boats, that there will be benefit if we really pump up the Lompico or keep more water in it, might be the better way to say it. It will benefit both the Monterey and even marginally the Santa Margarita, although that I'm less worried about, because to me the Santa Margarita is a leaky sieve and it just basically fills up and then it leaks, depending on what the rainfall is.
Yeah, there's a lot of distance between where the private well owners are and where we're going to be raising the water level. We're raising the water levels under Scotts Valley, and pretty much all the private well owners have their wells all were ruined and abandoned long ago in that area. So, south of Bean Creek is where we're talking about raising the lower aquifer levels, and north of Bean Creek, way north of Bean Creek, in the case of the people who are, or the few that are up in the Butano, they're far removed from what's the action down in Scotts Valley and at higher elevations even. So I just don't see that there's going to be any effect up at the, hundreds of feet up in the air, miles away. from what we're doing down in Scotts Valley.
Well, I mean, you did
Monterey's
change
an
you did
aquatarget
change the
most-
gradient.
What's that?
Go ahead, somebody, I spoke over somebody. Go ahead.
No, I think you had the floor, Gail.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I get your point, Jeff, and especially since they're up gradient from where most of the, where the changes would be due to in lieu or any other activities that we would do, but it does change the gradient, the groundwater gradient. So there is some at least marginal effect, but you're right. We should not oversell it. And I think, one of the reasons in part that we have the last item there of putting in the, water filling stations is a recognition of the fact that our ability to help the shallow private wells is limited.
Right. I'd like to make a comment that I almost want to put in on the beginning of the meeting here. It's kind of off topic, but it is related to this very factor. What's going on right now in the creeks between here in San Lorenzo Valley, there's a lot of erosion going on in the creeks in Ziante and Lockhart and Bean Creek. And people are losing their roads, and the creeks have cut their way down to the Santa Margarita where there's sand, and it's undercutting the mudstone, and we're getting landslides all over the place. And what this is doing is it's cutting in deeper down into the Santa Margarita, right where we have a lot of Santa Margarita storage underneath the mudstone, and it's helping to drain the Santa Margarita faster. The deeper those creeks cut, the more we're going to get drainage out of those aquifers quicker and not be able to hold that water until late summer. And so we've kind of got a problem there where water's, the private well owners would be helped if there was erosion control allowed in those creeks. We have this process now where we're not allowed to put rocks in the creek. We're not allowed to put anything in the creek. We don't touch the creek, but the creek is going crazy right now. The creeks are going crazy with this high water. And we've got a real problem in the county with lots of county roads damaged, including the ones to our house where we live. And it would actually be a win-win for the private well owners and the water in the county, and possibly for the wildlife if we did something about the erosion issues. Because the sand that's being cut right now is washed into the streams, and it goes downstream and it fills up the gravel beds that the salmon need to lay their eggs in. And when those are all filtered in, there's papers on this from Santa Cruz County from years ago. Ricker worked on this, I think. And then the sand is actually damaging the habitat for the salmon. So if we were allowed to do some erosion control in those streams, we could at least stabilize things where they are and not allow them to go further, which would help hold the Santa Margarita water levels kind of where they are now instead of letting them go deeper down. And it would also help get some of the sand out of the environment for the salmon, which would be a win for them. And it also help people who live in the mountains who need access with the roads. So there has to be some compromise between the different needs. And one of the needs is access to people's homes and fire protection and stuff. And with a lot of one-way roads up there right now, it's really kind of getting scary. And some people are actually cut off completely. So that's what I make that comment.
So the Santa Margarita is just, it's a pretty flaky formation. It's just easily eroded, but, and that's just natural. But Sierra, you're kind of I think the person that's most qualified to respond to this issue. We have done things like putting woody debris in creeks and projects to, that help in that regard. You want to comment on or respond to Jeff's concerns?
Well, in general, we do allow erosion control when property is being damaged. We work on that frequently. You need permits. You can't just go out, and certainly putting rocks in the creek has proven time and again to be a fairly ineffective means to protect banks. But yes, putting woody debris, doing vegetation management, often changing the slope, they're all possibilities. And there is some potentially funding available. You could work with the NRCS or the RCD to try to develop a big project. So Jeff, if you have specific things you wanted to talk about, maybe we could talk offline about some options. But I mean, I do agree that we're seeing a lot of valuable sediment being lost downstream.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Gosh, we got into talking about all that science related stuff, and I lost my place being
on 5.2 as just a general.
All right. So are there any other comments or questions? Ruth, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I've just got something for staff. And I tried to Google this. I didn't get an understanding, which is what's the difference between an URC, DAC, and SDAC?
Sure, I can.
And how did we manage to get so many of them here?
So the disadvantaged community, which is the DAC, and a severely disadvantaged community are areas that are identified based upon the US Census data on median household income. And so there's something called the American Community Surveys that are conducted annually and then rolled up into a 5-year summary. And the designation is tied to whether they are at, I believe it's at 60% versus 80% of the statewide median household income. And so in recent years, a number of grant programs through Department of Water Resources have made more of an emphasis to make sure that communities that are economically disadvantaged are involved in grant programs. And so one way that they have done that is to waive the funding match requirement if a project benefits one of those communities. The URC, which is the underrepresented communities, is a slightly broader catch-all category, which includes both disadvantaged and severely disadvantaged communities, as well as other as well as tribal communities, and even more broadly, something that is referred to as fringe communities. So if you can make a case that there is a fringe community, for example, homeless populations or others that are not being included through traditional grant programs, but you can loop them in through that broader definition, they have broadened that to try to encourage that participation. So those areas within the region that show up are tied directly to the median household income census data.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions by members of the board? How about among our members of the public?
Not within the room.
Okay. I don't think there's really anything we need to do on this, right? It was just sort of informational. So now we go on to staff reports, and we have the groundwater sustainability plan implementation activity status. And I think the idea behind, if I'm right, Tim, is that is to sort of summarize what everybody's been up to, in part because now we're not going to be meeting monthly the way we have been, but only quarterly. So we're just trying to keep the board up to date in a concise way of what the staff is doing behind the scenes. So do you want to share that with the?
Sure, that's exactly it. So let me pull that up and share my screen on that in just a moment. Yeah, exactly. So as the chair described, the intent on this, staff worked, both RWMF staff, Rob, and agency staff worked on putting this status report together. It ties directly to the information and the structure of the groundwater sustainability plan itself. And so the idea was just to be able to convey at each of these board meetings as part of the board packet what has been done. And so it is that's really the primary aim. And so hopefully the board, it serves the intended purpose of being a succinct summary of the work that's being done. And so there were Rob and others who worked on this. So I would encourage staff, if they want to add anything more to what you're seeing here, feel free to do so.
Would other members of the staff, either that are among the panelists or those that are listed under attendees, would they like to comment or add anything to this? I don't see any hands up. Any comments or questions by members of the board? Okay. If not, we can go on to the financial report for the period ending 2022. And Nick, I believe you're taking the lead on this.
Okay, hello again. I'll quickly pull up the report so I can share my screen. Okay, good evening. This is the financial reports for the period July 1st through December 31st. So effectively half the fiscal year. As you heard earlier in the annual report, the agency is in good fiscal health. We've obviously been very successful in being awarded grants and member contributions, member agencies investing to sustain the agency. In my report, I'm going to look at a couple of the, highlight a couple of the details that I thought jumped out, but a lot of information here for you to review. So the first point I'll point out again is while we produce these quarterly, this is cumulative for the period. We made a change to this report versus previous periods to include a budget versus actual. So we were previously just showing a P&L, but to add context for your review, sort of how we're tracking against the budget. And the budget shown, budget figures shown are pro rata, so they're 50% of the total budget. And you can see so far this year that costs are tracking under, revenue also tracking under. Administrative staff being one line item that's for the Regional Water Management Foundation contract. Based on how the billing's taking place, they need to obviously conclude their service before they bill for it. So this just displays one quarter, July through September. Yeah, so negative net income, but again, that includes no billing of member agencies at that time. Those did go out this month, so after December 31st, and that will correct the negative net income that once those contributions are collected. The reason they hadn't been billed to date is we were managing or working off our cash balance and paying invoices as they come due, and in a position that it wasn't necessary until recently. So
is that it, Nick? Or?
That's it. I don't have much else to add. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But
yeah, just following up on, if I might, the member contributions that we haven't billed for them yet. Is that, am I correct that we have in the grant proposal that we recently put in, that would basically cover those member contributions? In other words, we would not need to collect those from the member agencies, and the other agencies that are contributing, including Santa Cruz and Mount Herman, are contributing small amounts. So is that the other reason it hasn't been billed, is that we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed that we'll get money from the grant, or no?
That didn't factor, unfortunately, that didn't factor into my approach with it, but I should double check on that, frankly, because I don't know if there's any cost that the grant could potentially be offsetting. My bias would be to wait to make that judgment until the awarding of the grant is better known. But
maybe Rob or Tim can answer that question. In other words, what I'm asking are those contributions, were we hoping to get grant money for those?
No, not for the current year, because the grant will fund the activities, as I understand it, effective the award date. And so the current date's back. So, yeah, go ahead, Rob, you want to add to it?
Director Mayhood, we did not directly one for one look at the fees and try to completely offset them. But I will say that in the grant, we did apply for things like the annual report, like the stream flow monitoring that we were discussing tonight. So if we are successful, we will not know until June. So that to answer that question, we did not intentionally defer collecting the fees right now, because that money is off into the future. So I will say that if we were successful, the effective date of the grant actually is October, when the application was released. So it would directly offset this year's stream monitoring, the upcoming annual report and such. So that would be reconciled in the next budget cycle.
So it would, although it's not called that, it would be offsetting the contributions that the various agencies are making.
And it cannot fully offset every cost, because some of the activities that we fund are not eligible for the grant reimbursement, but it would be a pretty significant portion.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Doug.
Thanks, Gail. Nick, mindful of the timing issues relating to member agency contributions, can you provide any color about the budgeted amount for grant revenue? The information here, I see that there's maybe 100 grand left to be drawn, but we have 300 grand in the budget here. So maybe you can provide some clarity about where the 300 grand is going to come from.
Sure. There's a significant, not the 300 grand, but 110 being withheld, in retention for once the grant's completed. We'll be able to collect that balance. There's approximately the schedule, the grant reimbursement schedule doesn't display the full grant amount outstanding. That just shows what's been billed, and there is on the details in front of me, but there is, I believe, over 300,000 remaining outstanding on the second grant that the agency was awarded. Those grant funds will be received once the projects move forward and the costs are incurred.
Okay, great. I can sleep tonight. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? How about among the attendees?
Not within the room.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, there is one.
Yeah, why isn't Santa Cruz, City of Santa Cruz, a member agency?
I'm sorry, who was it that asked the question?
Member of the public, Frank Cheap.
Oh.
Effective this year, they became a member agency.
No, they're not. They're not member agencies. They're a sort of cooperating agency in just the way that Mount Herman is. And so basically, as the JPA was, as I understand it, as the JPA was constructed at that time, quite a number of years ago, the three agencies, which had to be public agencies, were the three that we know. And maybe somebody who's been around longer wants to answer why that decision was made the way it was, because this was before my time.
It was made that way because the County of Santa Cruz, San Lorenzo Valley and Scotts Valley at the time were the founding members and considered quote unquote the member agencies, and everyone else was just a agency of interest or a party of interest. And
I think some part of it also had to do that they don't directly use.
I think the simple answer is that the City of Santa Cruz does not use groundwater from the Santa Margarita Basin. mean, they obviously have an interest in what goes on here because they have surface water rights, but they're not groundwater users. And so I think that was.
To the degree that the groundwater leaks into the rivers, but yes, you're correct.
Yeah, and Gail, I was somewhat involved with that and it at the time, and that is the primary reason.
Thank you.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Under the joint powers agreement, under 6.1, we have representatives, there's an 11-member board, and they articulate that the joint powers agency is made up out of the 3 group: county, San Lorenzo Valley Water District, Scotts Valley Water District. But then they go and broaden it, and the members of the board of directors then are broader to include a representative from the city of Scotts Valley, representative from the city of Santa Cruz, Mount Herman Community Water Association, and private well owners. So it is a bit confusing because we have this board of a broader representative, but the joint powers agency is just that smaller group of people.
Well, it would seem that the city of Santa Cruz is certainly a source of income. If they were, I mean, they're here, they vote, they are members, they participate, but they're not paying anything in terms of budgetary stuff as far as I can see.
The county is.
Well, we are in 20.
I'm sorry, the city is also. The city-
It has changed. It's not reflected in the past year, that 60-30-10, but that we adopted earlier, or last year, we adopted a slightly different algorithm. And I believe that now City of Santa Cruz is contributing, somebody help me here, 10% or some.
5%.
5%, and I think Mount Herman is contributing 2.5 or something. So it's token, but I think it's just there to reflect the fact that they do have an interest in it. But your point is well taken in the sense that the lion's share of the costs are being, and I'm very aware of this, are being borne by Scotts Valley and San Lorenzo Valley Water District. And we have an unusual situation where we actually have representation without taxation. In other words, there are members of the private well owners have a vote, but they don't have to pay. So it's we have people who have votes that are, even though they're not contributing it. So it's an unusual situation.
Well, thank you for the clarification, but I will say the private well owners do pay in many other ways other than contributing to this agency in particular.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, then let's, where are we now? We are at the board compliance tracking. Tim, do you just need to beat us all over the head and tell us be good dogs and fill those things out?
No, all we need to do is include a chart in the packet to remind you where you're at, and the proactive board members will react accordingly. So that is in the packet, just as a reminder. If you have any questions regarding what the form filing entails, feel free to send an email to admin@smgwa.org, and Laura or myself or other staff will point you in the right direction in terms of those required filings.
Okay. Question for the entire board, which is, I'm got one of these Valentine's presents. I've got to get my ethics up to date. And a lot of these ethics courses go over the same material in a very shallow way. Has anyone found one that goes a little deeper, that's more interesting, that's maybe humor-based, or it's just interesting? There's a market for that. And just to go deeper instead of the same shallow coverage.
Well, 2 hours was enough, though. I mean,
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought that was, I thought I don't know about shallow. I mean, it's just way too much detail. In my
If
view.
it gives you any comfort, Ruth, I have to do ethics training as an industrial advisor to a private equity fund, and the states looks head and shoulders above what that private equity firm is doing in terms of content, depth, and comprehension. So there's that. It could be worse, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
So we now have items, 7 future items, 8 informational items, and then our events calendar. And is there anything anybody wants to talk about on these items? I'm not intending to go through each one of them, but if anybody would like to ask a question, Jack?
Yeah, not precisely the things you ticked off, but I see there's a President's special recognition of how much we've been saving in insurance costs. And so I have a comment on that. Is this the appropriate time?
Go ahead. Yes.
Just, it says we're only using, if I read it right, 20% of what we're putting into the pool. So that makes me wonder, okay, should we be paying less? And I'm presuming the way most of these insurance pools work is that if we continue to have savings, that our premiums will go down. Is that our expectation?
You often get a refund.
Oh, we do.
We actually have received very large refunds from JPIH. They're a nonprofit. And so usually it's based on exactly the metric you're seeing. So we could very well get a big check. Sometimes they bring a big check down and they give it to the
But they
board.
didn't send the check with the certificate.
I think it begins.
Okay, yeah.
So it begins.
Good, that's wonderful. I still wonder why they don't charge less to start with, but anyway.
Well, because it's they don't know what the future will hold, right?
But we're a good risk, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on these items? Okay. If hearing none, then I will, without objection. Whoops, Doug, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to sneak in a question about the modality for the March board meeting. Is it going to be hybrid or in person only? Do we have any visibility into that? And this is a selfish concern because I'll be out of the state on that date, and it would save me a flight back if we're still hybrid at that time.
You want to answer that, Tim?
My understanding is that the meeting is still going to be in the hybrid format, that we are essentially operating under the pre-COVID Brown Act requirements. And so under those requirements, it does require that a quorum of the board, so at least 7 members of the board, are participating within the jurisdiction of the agency. And so I think that is an important consideration, particularly maybe in the summer months, or if there are events where more people may be traveling. And in recent years, there's been more flexibility related to that the assumption is, not the assumption, the requirement is that we have at least a quorum of members participating either in person or remotely within the jurisdiction. And that, as we've done on recent agendas, those who are participating remotely are required to list their address and otherwise post that meeting. And so we do have the benefit of our legal counsel, Terry Rain, here. And so Terry, if there's anything that I missed with regard to that transition between current and potential upcoming requirements related to ensuring that we are meeting those quorum requirements. If not tonight, perhaps in the future, we may want to inform the board on that.
I will just mention, Tim was absolutely correct that we're going back to pre-COVID Brown Act rules for teleconferencing. There's a new law that was passed in September of 2022, which addresses teleconferencing, and it's awful. There's just cause requirements and a whole bunch of hurdles to jump through. And when I saw it, I had a heart attack.
Yeah.
After reading several articles about it, it says that public agencies have the choice to go back to pre-COVID Brown Act rules for teleconferencing, and that's what we're doing. We do want to avoid the new legislation. So if you do happen to run across it going, whoa, this is bad. It is bad. The new law is irrational and very difficult. So don't be surprised, because I was very surprised when I read the new legislation.
So you're saying we can opt out?
Yes, that we have the choice of going through this very rigorous just cause, which, you know, you gotta be really, really, really sick. And you have to vote on, there has to be a vote it's just procedurally unworkable.
Do we have to take action to use those old rules, or can we just go on choosing?
And several of the articles that I read from other law firms who were writing about it, the statement was public agencies always have the option to go back to the pre-Brown Act rules. It didn't say we had to vote on it. It didn't say we had to do anything in particular. I haven't frankly figured out exactly why they did the new rules if we still can use the old rules, and I don't understand that yet. It'd be interesting to talk to the legislative team that negotiated that. The League of California Cities opposed it strongly and did not prevail on the new legislation. Anyway, if you see the legislation, the new stuff, it's don't be surprised, because we still are good using the old stuff.
I think administratively, the only thing I would add is we often reach out in advance of the meeting just to confirm, RSVP. And I think the importance of noting whether or not you are within the basin or participating outside is an important part of that response, because we want to make sure that we have a quorum to conduct business.
Okay. Anything else? If not, without objection, I adjourn the meeting. Bye.